and welcome to NorthStar. So exciting to be here. We have been talking about toxic shame. We're going to continue to do that. Today we're going to talk about radical honesty and the power of being powerless. Pretty good combo there. A little paradoxical to hear that, but it is something that good to talk about today. So again, we're glad to have all of you on here with us, either in person or online. And again, always make the assumption if you're here with us, you're here because you're on your journey to recovery. And we know that recovery is one of those journeys that you move forward, you move back, you move forward, you move back, but it's eventually you get to where you can actually have a life that has purpose and meaning in it, and not so caught up in your hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and it's worth doing. And but it is a lifetime event, and one of the things that we have to continue to work at. And so I am glad to have all you here joining us. So at NorthStar, we talk. One of the things we always believe is that addiction is a physiological, a spiritual, and emotional disease. It's not about willpower. Willpower just simply does not work when it comes to this. We can say we're never ever going to use again, or we're never going to get on pornography again, or we're not going to get in that 33rd broken relationship again, and we do it again. That's how it works. So we have to look at this as one day at a time. And today we're going to also talk about my two favorite lines in addiction recovery are one day at a time, which I hope we see as more than just a cliche. It really is how you have to do this. Just today. We're not going to do anything today. And then the other one is we're as sick as our secrets. Those two, to me, are the ultimate recovery statements. And once you understand those, you can get somewhere. Because sick as your secrets is really what we're going to talk about today, is that the reason why we're not radically honest, and the reason why we put such unrealistic expectations on ourselves, which all creates self-loathing, or I should say self-loathing creates all that. And really, the secret to really recovery is to stop our self-loathing. I mean, we hate ourselves. So many of us we just cannot stand the thought of facing ourselves without stuff, without some form of a hurt, a habit, or a hang-up. And it's just not true. We can let go of all that. And again, I can't say it enough. Jesus came to this earth as our Lord and Savior. We don't have to hang on to the past. We don't have to keep score of all the failures and the mistakes we continue to make. But we just don't have to worry about that. God loves us. And it kind of leads us into some call the greatest story ever told, the greatest short story at least ever told, and that is the Prodigal Son. So I know this is a little bit long, but I want to read this to you because what I want us to hear is about toxic shame, about being radically honest with ourselves, and then becoming aware of some of the things we do and say and think that create so many problems in our lives. So to start this, of course, we have to realize that Luke 15 is about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and then Jesus leads into the prodigal son. I always love the first part of Luke 15. It talks about that Jesus was talking to these undesirable people. But what really you need to hear there is when you look at some of the stuff with Jesus, he loved being with people such as ourselves who are hurting, who are in some form of addictive behaviors and thinking, but we're seeking something. We know there's something wrong here. We know that we've become powerless in some ways, and they were listening to Jesus. They're very intent on what he had to say. And of course, then the church people, the Pharisees at the time, of course, are condemning Jesus because he's hanging with those people. So I hope you hear again that we are those people, and Jesus loves us and wants us to, all he asks for us is to just reach out and ask for God's love. So, the greatest story ever told. Then he said, there was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. Now, of course, goes against all Jewish tradition back then to do that. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through the country, and he began to feel it. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his fields to slop the pigs. So you can imagine him being Jewish, how horrible of an assignment that was. He was so hungry, he would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig slop, but no one would give him any. So he was hurting. That brought him to his senses. He said, all those farmhands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. He got right up and went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him, his heart pounding. He ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a prize-winning heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. All this time, his older brother was out in the field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked what was going on. He told him, your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast, barbecued beef, because he has him home safe and sound. The older brother stomped off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, look, how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief, but have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then the son of yours, that would be his brother, by the way, then the son of yours who has thrown away your money on whores shows up, and you go all out with a feast. His father said, son, you don't understand. You're with me all the time, and everything that is mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we had to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's found. So Jesus, again, such a great storyteller with his parables. And you notice at the end there, Jesus didn't say he was a perfect child. He's done everything right his entire life, and so now we can love him. That is not what he said. All he said was that he came back. And I think we can go a little bit further with us talking about toxic shame. The son actually recognized and became aware of the things he had done, the things he'd wasted all of his money. He lived in ways that he shouldn't have. I was reading the other day in a book about the prodigal son that the son probably latched on to this guy. The guy may have been like sorry he knew him, and he just wouldn't leave because he was that desperate. So the guy said, well, I don't know, I got to get rid of you. Go live with the hogs, basically is what he said, which would be, again, pretty awful if you're a Jew. And then, of course, the other side, this is the older son was angry and put out and mad because his father was forgiving him. And we get that too. You know, we have to be aware of where we're at in this. I can relate to both people here. I can relate to the prodigal son. I can relate to the older brother, both ways. And, you know, it's funny, but if you really look at this, I was reading John MacArthur's book, and he was talking about, if you really look at it, neither son loved their dad much. They both were, you know, they were mad and angry and unhappy with dad. And of course, us in NorthStar, as we talk about codependency, some of us were trying to infer that dad maybe been a little codependent in his behaviors with his kids. But what we really need to see here is the unconditional love. But I think that this son the one that the prodigal son who went out and did all the things wrong, let's face it, he did about everything you could think of probably is wrong. Back then he may not have had access to fentanyl or heroin or whatever, or cocaine, but I'm sure he drank his share of wine. And the point is that he messed up. But it took, as we always talk about, it takes pain for us to recover. And I think it'd be fair to say that this son actually felt the pain he needed. If he'd stayed at home and kind of, sort of lived off his dad, maybe worked a little bit, probably not much, he wouldn't have got it. He would have lived this life with hurts, habits, and hang-ups for a long time. And, of course, the older son, we can relate to him too. He's out there being martyr man, and he's working hard and not being appreciated, and he's miserable, and he's happy to be unhappy. And those are all things we don't want in our lives either. So the main thing for us here is to hear that we can be forgiven for what we do. God is there. He's waiting on us to get it right. He's always with us. It's us that draws away from him. So one of the ways that we can recover and one of the ways we can get healthier is through radical honesty. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but radical honesty sounds really good, and it sounds like something we all should do. But I promise you that most of us don't do that. We're mostly honest. Most of the time we're honest. But my guess is that being radically honest is tough. And we got to be careful with that, and I'll talk about that later. But so here's just a couple statistics for you. We learn to lie as early as 2 years old. So 2-year-olds learn how to lie. Right? Did you get that? No. Right? How about this? Average adults lie 0.6 to 1.56 lies per day. So if we do the statistics, we're all lying about 1.5 times a day. Words used to cooperate can also be used to deceive and misdirect. Right? And the more advanced the language, the more sophisticated our lies. And, of course, we all know this one. The more addicted we are, the more we can deceive and lie into ourselves and others. And we always think about, with addictive thinking, we always talk about how, you know the joke, when do you know an addict's lying? When their lips are moving, right? Well, the bigger part of that is we may hear the lies from someone else who's addicted or living addictively. What we don't hear is all the lies we say to ourselves. And those lies go from all the way from toxic shaming, how awful and terrible we are, to justifying why we continue to use. And we all do them at the same time, right? We can, what's the old, joke? Looks like I picked a bad day to give up cocaine today because I'm stressed today, right? All the way to, you know what? I don't deserve anything good. I'm awful. I'm terrible. I don't deserve. I'm an awful person. That's lying too. It's all lies. So, why do we lie? I suppose in the old days you can make an argument that if you're competing for scarce resources, you might lie. If I know there's an awesome wild blackberries over here and I see 6 people coming looking for the same blueberries, I go, I think I saw them over there, right? And then you run and get yours. That would make sense to do that. That would make sense to lie. But we're not in that world. Most of us, we don't live in a world of scarcity really anymore. And so really what the lying really is about us, about how we feel about ourselves and how we keep our addictions alive with lying. And so there's some quotes here. This is Maria, who's a recovering alcoholic, and these are some quotes from her I think are just so good. She goes, I would never have admitted the truth back when I was drinking. Back then, I lied about everything and never took responsibility for the things I did. There were so many lies, and half of them didn't even make sense. I lied to cover up my drinking, but I lied about other stuff too. Stuff that didn't even matter. Where was I going? When I'd be back? Why I was late? What I ate for breakfast, right? Those are all lies. And if you think about it, for you that are really struggling with recovery early stages, it's hard not to lie about everything. We want to lie about anything and everything. Or how about all of us wonderful codependents out there? We lie all the time about stuff because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? Or we don't want to be rejected. So radical honesty is very difficult, and you can't do it without connection and support. And that's why we get to what I think is the great quote is, we are sick as our secrets. If we cannot be radically honest, at least with ourselves, the chances of us ever recovering is slim. And how do we do that? Because if we're lying to ourselves, we may not always be aware that we are lying to ourselves, and that's why we need connection and support. When we have people will come to NorthStar who maybe have been in or are in very difficult relationships, and we're sitting there justifying it and talking about how we're going to love them to health and all that stuff. It takes us as a group to say, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. You need to look at you and what's causing you to feel this way. So we have to really work at this one. And I also think the other thing about connection with support groups on this is, for many of us, we come in there and we're broken lives. We always talk about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, which I think is just such an important tool for addiction recovery. So if you have the general population, 12.5% of the population score a 4 or more out of 10, 4 or more. When we look at our group, at least 70% of us have scored 4, 6 or more, and I would say majority of, probably even higher, probably about 90% of us have scored 4 or more. So when we come from abusive backgrounds, when we're suffering from PTSD, we're going to loathe ourselves. We're going to blame ourselves. We carry so much shame with us. And what we, of course, want to do all the time is become aware of that, so the childhood damages that we experience, we don't have to keep living those as we become adults. So we're sick as our secrets. We have to think about toxic shame again and shame. So toxic shame is, I loathe myself. I see nothing good about myself. I'm carrying these huge burdens, this huge weight on my back of all the bad things about me because of what's happened to me in the past or what I've done. Shame, on the other hand, we need that. Shame is the things that tells us we need to quit. We need to stop doing destructive things in our lives. We feel bad about it, so we don't want to keep doing it. So it's important to understand that. So toxic shame would definitely enable us to have a lying habit. And as one author said, it's remarkably easy to get in the habit of lying. I don't know about you, if you ever did this maybe as a kid where you just didn't tell the truth, right? It just, even though, like Maria said in her quotes, even if it didn't matter, I still wouldn't tell the truth. Or we know people who do that, right? I mean, there's some people I know in my life, they tell me stuff and I'm just going, okay, whatever. Which I guess I'm lying when I don't say you're lying right now. But a lot of times it's like, and there's small lies, there's big lies, all this stuff. The big thing, though, is sick as our secrets is we're hiding and we're loathing ourselves, and that's why we lie like we do, because we want to be able to keep doing it, right? So the other thing is we developed the porcupine index from our shame, toxic shame, where we don't really trust people. We come to believe that everyone's going to harm us. It's just a matter of when. So what we do with our porcupine index is we send our quills out and we keep you away. You'll get to know me. You'll see me smiling. You'll get to know my name. You'll see me. I'll be friendly. But you're never going to get to know me. And I'm certainly not going to give you my secrets and all the things I'm thinking about myself and you, because if I don't like myself, I probably don't like a whole lot of people around me. So we need groups, which is so hard because our porcupine index would tell us groups are the last thing we want to do is connect with other people. We'd much rather isolate and live resentfully and be mad at ourselves first and foremost, and then, of course, be mad at all the other people around us. So the benefits of radical honesty are there, but it's hard to get to because of our desire to be alone. But radical honesty, telling the truth about things large and small, especially when doing so exposes our foibles and entails consequences, is essential not just to recovery, but from addiction, but for all of us trying to live a more balanced life in our reward-saturated ecosystem. It works on many levels, and this is Dr. Lemke talking about that. So what's the benefits? What's more benefits of this? We become much more aware of our actions, because that one is that's the toughest one of all, is for us to see the things we don't want to see in ourselves, to understand why we're doing the things that we do. So it promotes awareness. It also promotes and fosters intimate human connections. Once you're not sitting there lying about everything, you can actually connect to people. And you become smarter with people. You know who are safe and who are not. It leads us to a truthful autobiography, which holds us accountable not just to our present, but also to our future selves. Further, telling the truth is contagious. It might even prevent the development of a future addiction, right? When we're dishonest with ourselves, it's hard for us to recover. It opens up our gates so we can neurogating, so we can open that brain up and work both ways. And eventually, though it can be tough, being radically honest becomes freeing. Now, we have to be careful with this. We don't want to be hurtful with our honesty. There's a great quote out there. It's called, "Honesty is tyranny," and that's where I use my honesty to hurt other people. So we're not talking about that. And certainly, in the 12 steps, at step 8, we talk about we make amends if it doesn't harm others, right? So we always have to be aware of that. And again, that's part of being in groups where you get coaching on that. But think about having freedom and authenticity with people where you actually are you. You're not having to hide all the stuff about you and all the things you're doing. You know, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's some statistics out there that suggest that clergy, as much as 50% of clergy has issues with pornography. Well, think about that one. If you talk about a genius tool by Satan is, I work for the church, I serve God, and I'm frustrated, I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed, and so I decide, well, what the heck? So I look a little bit of porn, don't have to pay for it, nobody knows I'm doing this. Well, guess what? Eventually it creates a wedge between me and God. It also creates a wedge between other people. And it creates a big blind spot where we actually believe we're not harming anybody, when the fact is we're pulling away because we are ashamed. We don't want anybody to know about it. And all that's how radical honesty can be so hard, to have someone like a clergy that come and say, you know what, I got issues with porn. That's tough. But the ones that do it, they're the ones that recover. The ones that hide, they keep hiding. They keep getting further away and further away. So it helps us to be aware of our dysfunctional behaviors and thoughts. That's important. And the big thing is denial. If I'm radically honest, it's hard for me to be in too much denial. And again, this all has to be done with people that help us to know what they're doing, right? And denial, let's talk about denial just for a minute. We're going to talk about the physiology of denial. I always like it when I can take physiological and emotional, spiritual, and put them together. So denial is likely meditated by a disconnect between the reward pathway of our brains and the higher functions of our brain. So basically, midbrain, front of our brain. So the front part of our brain up here, they call that the executive functioning part. That's the part that says, yeah, you probably don't want to go 100 miles on the interstate. You're going to get arrested, or you could cause an accident, harm people, all those kind of things. The midbrain, on the other hand, is going more and more and more, faster, faster, faster. Let's go, let's go, let's go. So what we got to do is there's a highway there, and a lot of times what happens is with addiction is that washes out. So you got the front part of your brain hollering and screaming, telling you to stop. This part's not hearing it, right? And so you have to bring it back together. And denial is a great way to keep you addicted. But so the point is, if we can start being radically honest about ourselves, our brain changes and it gets healthier. And so a quote from, again, Anna Lemke's book, she talks about what fires together, wires together. So if I'm being radically honest, if I'm doing things I should be, I'm not living my sick as our secrets, then my brain can start to connect again. And that's when we can become healthy and whole again. So does being purposefully honest help rewire our brain to reduce denial and increase self-awareness? We hope so. There's some research that suggests that. It gives us credence to time spent in mindfulness and support groups if we do that. Consistent focus on truth-telling may rewire the brain to create more healthy awareness about ourselves, which is the whole key to recovery. It may help us to manage the reduction or even the elimination of stuff we do. So I'm going to read this one last quote here. So, telling the truth draws people in, especially when we're willing to expose our own vulnerabilities. I don't know about you, but I feel very connected to people who are honest about themselves. And I would guess for a lot of us who've been in recovery, we're pretty quick to tell when someone's withholding, not telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. There's some if they're holding back. This is telling the truth draws people in, especially when we're willing to expose our vulnerabilities. This is counterintuitive because we assume that unmasking the less desirable aspects of ourselves will drive people away, right? With our self-loathing, we assume if I were to tell everybody that, I haven't told this, but I've been drinking a lot lately and I'm miserable, well, we would think, well, there people are going to judge me. No, the fact is the right people are going to bring us in and thank us for being honest and be there for us. It logically makes sense that people would distance themselves when they learn about our character flaws and transgressions. In fact, the opposite happens. People come closer. They see in our brokenness their own vulnerability and humanity. They are reassured that they are not alone in their doubts, their fears, and their weaknesses. That's a great quote. If you think about it, when we meet, like at NorthStar, when we meet, someone will, because we all don't value ourselves. So someone will say, well, I want to talk about something. So they bring it up, they talk about, in about 5 minutes, they go, well, I just don't want to dominate the group time. I don't want to let other people. Well, the whole point is we're all learning from that. When someone brings up something in their life about what they're struggling with, I promise you 90% of us in that room absolutely understand and relate to it and learn from it. And that's what she's talking about. Once we're able to let that porcupine index get down to about a 2 instead of a 9, we can actually start talking to people, and we start realizing we're not so bad. One of the things I love to do when I'm talking to people one-on-one, I just have to do, so I can't help myself, it's my anecdotal research, is people who are struggling with addiction loathe themselves, correct? So what's the one thing I love to do? I always like to look them in the eye and say, you know what? You're not so bad. And guess what we do? We look away. We can't stand the thought that we're not so bad. We have developed such a terrible judgment on ourselves that we just cannot fathom the idea that we're not so bad. We think we have to be perfect, which of course never happens. So then we just judge ourselves all the time. So what we have to do over and over, you hear this over and over, we have to face our shame. We have to face our pain. That's really hard to do. And that's why sometimes I get a little bit in trouble with people who aren't in the recovery world, because I'll hear about someone who's going through a very difficult time, and I feel really bad for them, but I also know it's probably going to make them a better person in some way. That's just kind of how I see the world. And so I don't wish pain, I don't wish hardship on anybody. Make sure you hear that. But if I'm living a secret life that's destroying myself, I do hope pain for you eventually to get you to stop, because you're going to destroy your life. You're going to have pain one way or the other. And that's why Dr. Tversky in his book about addictive thinking writes about prolonging the inevitable. Probably my biggest speech I give to family members is every time you step in and you help a family member who's struggling in any way with dysfunctional living, all you're doing is prolonging the inevitable. They will never get well with that. They have to face pain. They have to face their shame to get better. And so and the problem is for a lot of us, we're in so much pain, we have a hard time even feeling emotion. People will say, well, guys, sometimes I think I must be something wrong with me. I must be like a sociopath because I just don't feel anything when I should. I'm going, no, it's called alexithymia. You can't describe how you feel because you're in so much pain and misery. You need to figure out ways to get to that. And our brain, because our shame and our pain gets so high, we can't even look at it anymore. Our brain just shuts it down and says, I can't do this anymore. That's not a way to live. It may sound like it is. I've known people have said to me, well, God, that'd be kind of nice not to feel stuff. And I go, that is sad to hear that. Because if you can't feel pain, you're not going to feel joy. If you're not going to feel sadness, you're not going to feel gladness. It's just how it works. You got to be able to feel it all. But I always tell people, like I'll tell people who are suffering with a family member who's being awful and are definitely sociopathic, I go, what a terrible life sentence to be someone who will never know what love is. That's terrible. We're made for love. That's what makes us special as humans. And so real fast, the gift of powerlessness is all part of this. If I get to the point where I am radically honest, then the next thing I have to do is I have to see myself as powerless. So I always talk about that moment in time, pre-step one, right? Step one, I say to myself, my life has become unmanageable and I'm powerless over whatever, right? Whatever my hurts, habits, and hang-ups are have become so powerful, they're now controlling me. Well, when you get to step one, you have to come to the conclusion that not only what you put your faith in didn't work, it was harming you. It was destroying you. So when we get to powerlessness, we are now becoming radically honest. Because you know what? Here's some good things. As bad as powerlessness sounds, because it does sound, I get it. You know, I don't want someone to say, congratulations, Craig, you're now powerless. But you know what? In recovery, that's what we have to be. So here's some benefits or the gift of powerlessness. By admitting powerlessness, I have nothing left to fear. Think of how much time and energy we spend hiding our secrets, keeping all that truth away from others who's going to judge us and reject us. We're no longer trying to uphold false standards or maintain a false image. We are no longer trying to control and be perfect. I don't know about you, but that one sounds very, very attractive. We have stopped trying to justify our actions and create excuses. We embrace healthy human shame and admit that we are not perfect. We are humbled to the core, and this means we have nothing left to lose and thus nothing left to fear. Can you imagine that? Living a life where you have nothing to fear, where you don't have to worry about being rejected because of how awful you are. You don't have to continue to tell lies about what you're using, doing, all those things. By feeling the pain we've tried to avoid, we free ourselves from the menacing grasp of all of our actions. Sounds pretty good, huh? We will find freedom in our powerlessness. And for our toxic shame, this means admitting we're imperfect and never will be perfect. It means admitting we're flawed like every other human being. I know sometimes when I'm in my hurts, habits, and hang-ups are too strong, obviously I'm not very happy with me. But the other thing I do is I assign way too much healthiness to other people, when the fact is all of us are struggling with something. By living our lives that in our humbled state, we learn that actually there's nothing painful about it. Our fears about not being good enough or being imperfect are completely irrational. We start to break down our associations between imperfection, inadequacy, and pain. After spending more time like this, we no longer feel that fear. We no longer feel the paralyzing doubts of inadequacy. So what do we got to do here? Be ready to get on our way down the road with recovery. We have to be radically honest without harming others, of course. We have to embrace powerlessness as a gift. Put those two together, we can actually start living our lives. We can start connecting. So what do we have to do? I know you're going to hear it over and over from me. You have to get healthy people in your lives. Find a therapist, a clergy person, whoever it is that's healthy as well to talk to. If you have toxic people in your life who want you to fail, who want you addicted, you got to get yourself away from them. It's not that you're better than them. That's never the subject here. It's just that you cannot recover if you have toxic people in your life who are keeping you down. I always tell people when I talk to them, again, I'll say, you got this width of breadth of people in your life. When you don't like yourself and you loathe yourself and have a lot of toxicity, what happens is that list will go like this, but the quality of those relationships will go way up. And that's what we're after. I know people in NorthStar who have never had healthy relationships in their life, and they're now starting to experience that. It's pretty neat. And a little suspicious at times of it when it happens, but we do. So we need to be mindful. We do need to spend time with God. We need to spend time focusing on His love, His desire for us to connect with Him. We need to live with gratitude, intentional gratitude. We need to do things. The list we always use is do this every day. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Write down something good that happened today. Pray, meditate, exercise, and then go out and do something, do a random act of kindness for someone. Because what it does, it gets it off you and all your pain and misery. It helps you to become grateful, and you get to see how God works in your life. We have to realize we're not God, so we'll never be perfect. And we have to somehow, with help, face our pain. So, live with gratitude, get healthy people in our lives, exercise, pray, focus on God some, go out and do something nice for someone else, and appreciate something good that happened today is how we do this. So we have to start somewhere. You are not this cursed, stupid, inadequate person that you see yourself as. That is not you. That's the biggest lie of all. God created you. You have your special skills. You have your dreams. You have your goals. You have a need for connection with God and other people, and it's time for us to start doing that. So, I appreciate you joining us today. And I hope that you can find ways to connect out there with people that want what's best for you. And so we're going to close with the Prayer of Serenity today. And again, I always tell people, and I have to tell myself this a lot as well, if we just lived this prayer, life would be pretty good. Hard for us to do. But let's go ahead and pray the Prayer of Serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to His will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with Him, that forever and ever. Amen. All right, again, thank you for joining us, and if you ever need to get a hold of me, please feel free to do so. All my information is on the website, and I look forward to all of you on your hearing about your journey of recovery. Thank you.